Hello, Max Wright here, and here with Ben Swann from Truth in Media Project. Ben has been a fantastic friend of the Liberty Movement for quite a few years now, and but what I want to talk to him about today is the education system. And primary reason for talking to you is that you were homeschooled, yes?
That's right. I was homeschooled really from my entire academic career was homeschooled. I'm now a homeschool dad.
Okay.
I have 5 kids, and we homeschool all of our kids.
Oh, congratulations. So now I was not homeschooled. I'm a victim of public education. But I just want to find out more. Let's talk about what I see going on right now is literally a revolution in education. And can you just maybe set the scene for that? What's going on in the education world, and why are parents choosing to opt out of the state-run system?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to step back from the public education system in America and realize that it's not a good system. It's a failing system. I think everyone agrees on that. I think we might disagree on the varying levels of why and how it's failing, but I think for the most part we agree that students are not graduating with the level of education we want them to. It was an interesting experience when you step back and look at issues like No Child Left Behind and what a failure that process has been. I just heard, in fact, this morning a whole discussion here in Texas about Montessori schools and about the need to create Montessori schools and use that process in order to educate kids better, because it allows people to really focus on issues they're interested in. It allows more of a tutoring as opposed to that single teacher in the classroom. So I think everyone would agree we need improvements and we need changes. The big debate is, how do you do that?
Okay, and so maybe can you give us the libertarian school of thought on that?
Well, I think libertarians obviously believe in individual freedom, and they believe in individual liberty, and there is certainly a large percentage of libertarians who are in favor of homeschooling. There's now kind of a new movement coming along called unschooling, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with. Really is the process of saying there is no formal form of education. You kind of learn what you want to learn and how you want to learn and at the rate you want to. I think that's an interesting idea. I'm a little bit hesitant on that because I don't think our society's ready for that at all. We have a hard enough time accepting the idea of homeschooling, right? We have a hard enough time accepting that parents actually have the ability to teach their kids. Right. And so, yes, you got to take baby steps.
Yeah. So maybe just set the scene a little bit. Do you mind sharing with us your experience? Actually, no, before we get there, the homeschool movement, there seems to be a few little niches there, if we can. One sort of that jumps out at me is kind of like the religious faction,
yes, which
is I don't want to send my kids to a school that that teaches evolution and not
right.
that. There's that whole movement. Mm-hmm. I think there's another whole movement of the libertarianism. It's like, well, if we acknowledge the fact that if we sent our child to a Muslim school, they're probably going to come out the other end a Muslim. If you send them to a Jewish school or a Christian school, they're probably going to come out the other end. What we don't realize is if you send your kid to a government school, you're probably going to come out the other end, enamored with government, thinking government is supposed to solve all of our problems. Not very libertarian ideal. Right. So another niche I see there is just a free market type school, just competitive and going down that vein. Are there any other big niches that I'm missing there?
No, I think you've pretty much covered them all, and I think it's interesting because the modern homeschool movement in America started with the religious folks, right? It began with people, and that's actually how my parents got into it. Okay. As a religious couple did not want their kids to be in a school where we were taught evolution and that kind of thing. What's funny is the way we homeschooled in our home growing up, we used private schools. So a lot of homeschoolers will create their own curriculum. They'll piecemeal curriculum together, or they'll use a religious-based curriculum. What we used was actually a secular private school out of Baltimore as our elementary education. And it was not a Christian curriculum, so we were still taught evolution.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
It was still part of that process. And my parents actually didn't shy away from it. They just wanted it to be taught through a certain point of view, right? So, consider these thoughts and remember that the theory of evolution is a theory. It's not a fact. It's not proven. And so that's kind of how we went through the process. A lot of what I would say our homeschool process was about critical thinking.
Right.
Teaching you to be a critical thinker. I think that's what a lot of homeschooling is, regardless of whether it's religious or it's based on the idea of not becoming just a government drone as a child. It's about saying we want critical thinking skills to be developed in our students. And the reality is that is not being developed in most students in public education.
Well, that's we could debate all day, does it qualify, and certainly the atheist community would certainly be very questionable about this religious dogma,
sure,
perhaps in their minds taught in these home schools. But compared to government schools,
Right.
I mean, it's not a very high benchmark to hit to surpass it in terms of teaching critical thinking.
Right, absolutely, absolutely, and I think again, look, in public schools, let's just take the issue of evolution, because that's a very contentious issue for some people who would say, no, you need to be taught evolution because that's the only way, right? One thing that we know is that we don't know.
Right.
There's so much about the origin of the universe and where it comes from, and whether aliens were involved in it, which I don't believe, but whether aliens were involved in it, whether it was intelligent design, whether there was a creator, a God who did it, which, by the way, Einstein believed in, right? Einstein said there had to be a designer for this. He didn't believe that God was involved intricately in our lives, but said there had to be some design to it. I think that regardless of where you fall on it, one thing we should be encouraging in students is critical thinking and debate, right?
Yes.
To be able to question things. Because as soon as you tell someone, well, you're not allowed to question,
Yeah.
now you're putting them in a position where that becomes the mantra of every part of education, right? Don't question anything. So when you're going through history classes and learning about the importance of an income tax and a progressive income tax, the importance of a central bank, which we barely kind of skim over, right? The importance of having government intervention in all these areas, what you're essentially teaching is don't question those things because the right decision's been made.
And even the very nature of schooling. I mean, it's the bell rings, sit down, you will be spoken to, don't talk, and when the time comes, I'm going to ask you to parrot it back. The most efficiently way you can parrot it back, the more accurately you can do it, the better marks you'll get and you'll be progressed. Well, that's not critical thinking at all.
That's right.
And that's where we're taught today.
And that's standardized testing, right? Yeah. We're going to teach you to pass the test. We're going to teach you to get all the right answers, right? So whatever the question is, I need you to give me the correct answer back. And if you can't give me the correct answer, then you have to be held back until you can give it. Which is entirely, I think it's so easy when we talk about failure in public education. I mean, to me, that is such an obvious failure when you're just teaching people how to regurgitate back to you what you've told them, as opposed to saying, we want to challenge you to think. And I think when you come down to a lot of, we're at this Bitcoin conference, right? When you talk about cryptocurrencies, when you talk about new ways of thinking about currency and free exchange between people, that takes critical thinking. It's why these processes take so long to introduce to the general population, because the general population can't even understand that.
I know, very, very hard for them to think, for sure. Now, maybe the reason I like to think about the reasons why this is, or what are the parameters, what are the environment that created this system? And I look at, like the entertainment industry, and in the last 2 decades, we've, iPods and PlayStations and interactive games and communicating with people around the world. And then I look at, the progressions made in the world of education, and certainly in the state-run education, for 200 years, it's been one person standing out the front of a blackboard or whiteboard teaching to people. That's just, it's insanely slow. Progression and development of new ideas, new technology. And that would be very typical of a government-run institution, a bureaucracy, and whatever else. So I think that's why, libertarians certainly advocate competition in education.
That's right.
I would just, as a parent, I would just love to be able to have, this plethora of different schools all competing for my child, basically, and they're saying, look, here's what we did, and here's the average income of our graduates, and here's the skills that we teach them, and just that level of competition would just see a dramatic rise in education. So let's talk about what you've chosen to do, if you don't mind, with your 5 children.
Sure.
And some of you've mentioned unschooling. I don't know if you've gone that path for your kids.
We haven't. We're actually doing the same curriculum. The same private school that I went to in elementary school is the same one that they go to now. What's kind of cool about that is when I was going, it only went up to 8th grade, and so we had a high school that was in Chicago and did a whole other program. That's now changed. This same school offers all the way through 12th grade. So that's exciting that they'll be able to stay in that system. It's really interesting because the way they are tested is a lot of, here's the question, give me the answer. As the homeschooling parent, the tutor, when I'm working with my kids, for me, it's about helping them to understand the whys and questioning things. And so they can answer back. I give you a great example. I have a daughter who was recently having to write about the separate but equal clause and the idea behind separate but equal in Jim Crow laws that said, hey, listen, people may be equal, but they're allowed to be kept separate from each other, right? So no using the same water fountains for coloreds and whites. And so she was supposed to write about that and just give like a brief description. And instead she turned in a 3-page essay explaining, because my wife is Puerto Rican, right? And so how this would directly affect her life if she was alive at that time. And the fact that she has dark hair, dark eyes, and dark skin, and her sister, who's about about 16 months younger than she is, has light skin, light eyes, and light hair. And the fact that the two of them would not be allowed to sit together, to use the same restrooms. And so it was interesting to put her through the context of that exercise. Don't just regurgitate some idea, but really think about why these laws were bad laws and how government intervening into the situation, deciding who can be and where they can be and what they can do, really was the cause of major problems.
Right. Now, the term homeschooling, for most people certainly not involved in the industry, it conjures up images for them of a person in a room, barely getting any social activity, one-on-one contact with a parent day in, day out, that kind of thing. Now, I think really a much better definition of homeschooling is just not state schooling, because it is such a broad spectrum. There's community schools, there's groups of other parents. Can you maybe go through some of the ways that homeschoolers like to socialize their children?
And it's been an evolution, because growing up being homeschooled, when I was growing up, we didn't know any other homeschoolers, right? We were out in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. It felt like, even though we were right outside of El Paso, Texas, we really were in the day in, day out, just together in our little confined space. And it's very different now. I mean, now you have so many different groups. I have two daughters who are both on a homeschool league basketball team. The league, though, is an AAU team, or league, excuse me. And so their team are all homeschoolers from different parts of the city. They practice together, but then they play against Catholic schools, public schools,
that's awesome.
All kinds of stuff like that. So they have that great experience. Very involved in ballet. The boys play, flag football. They're on teams. So most of their friends, a lot of their interactions are public school or private school kids. It's just so much easier now. And you actually have homeschool students now too, because there's been some precedent for this, of saying, wait a minute, as taxpayers, we still have to pay property taxes, who are now playing on sports teams. So this year, a lot of people don't know this, but this year there were 4 homeschool students who got Division I scholarships to play sports in the United States. And one of them was a young lady from Indiana. I happened to see her play in a game because my daughters were there for a tournament, and she was got a Division I scholarship to, I'm trying to remember the school. It wasn't Tennessee, but UConn is where she was headed to. And she's been homeschooled her whole life, and now she's playing basketball at UConn because, again, she was involved in all these activities. So it's very different. There are big groups. In Ohio, we have a group called HELP, where you homeschool, 3 days a week, homeschool families come in there. They have college-style lectures that are being given. They're interacting with each other. It's a totally different situation. And it's the number one complaint that people have. Socialization. How is your kid going to be socialized? My argument would be you're better socialized in those kinds of settings than in a public school setting, where basically you have all these issues with bullying and kids being picked on and these strange peer groups that form. I mean, that's not really a realistic socialization model for the real world.
Yeah. And I mean, the kids are reflecting the behavior they're seeing from teachers. Sit down, do this, don't move. The teachers are the bullies as well, as far as to a certain extent.
Well, yeah, I mean, it certainly is. It's a dysfunctional system. It is a top-down system, and the idea too, like for instance with bullying, this whole zero tolerance policy of fighting in school. I mean, where does that come from? And where else in society are we going to create a zero tolerance policy for standing up for yourself?
Exactly.
And so instead they're being taught you're powerless. You don't have the ability to stand up for yourself. You need to go to a teacher. If the teacher doesn't respond, you need to go to the principal. But some authority over you will ultimately solve your problem, when in fact sometimes solving the problem just comes with balling up a fist. Sometimes that is the answer. That's not really politically correct to say, but it's true.
But it is very true, yeah. So maybe I would imagine the next complaint from homeschoolers for parents considering homeschooling is the time involvement from them. Yeah. Now, I'm assuming there's a lot of tools online. There's a lot of communities you can form in your area, and the internet's been a great gift to that community to help find those people. Yeah. But there's also sharing of resources and sharing of time by parents and paid tutors. Can you maybe go through a few different options there about what the tools available to parents and what kind of time you choose to put in?
Well, see, in our situation, it's a little bit different. We put a lot of time into it. My wife and I split the duties. In a lot of homeschool families, it's just the mom who's homeschooling. I'm totally against that idea. If dad can, and I think you can always find a way to do it. Dad needs to be involved in that as well, because many times parents have different teaching styles because their personalities are different. Mm-hmm. And your kids, more often than not, are going to reflect one of those learning styles, right? So they're going to either be more like dad or more like mom. I know in our family, we see that all the time, where some of the kids learn like dad, and so it's a lot easier for me to teach them than it is for my wife to teach them, and vice versa. There are some styles where, as you said, you have some parents who do co-ops together, where one day a week they each take a turn, and they've got 4 or 5 kids, and they're working with students that day, and they switch off. Some of them do it by subject. One parent is going to teach math one day a week, one parent's going to teach reading and literature, and then they split it up that way. There are a lot of ways you can do it. I would encourage people just to be creative. Find out, first of all, what community is around you. So start to get to know people who are also homeschoolers, develop relationships with them, and then figure out what the system is. I will tell you this, homeschooling is hard, right? It's not easy. And so we sometimes will paint this picture of, number one, everyone needs to do it. It's not that big of a deal. It's a very big deal. It's a huge commitment. It's a multi-decade commitment. Especially if you have multiple kids over a span of ages, right? You're going to be in this for a long time. That gets tiring. It's an issue of consistency. I would say make sure that you build breaks in. Growing up, we did accelerated education, so we didn't really take a lot of breaks, and we ended up graduating really early. We don't do that with our kids. With our kids, we follow the school year. When they have days off in the regular school year, then we take days off as well, with the exception of snow days. But other than that, we follow that. Give yourself the break. Give yourself the time to recuperate, because as a parent, you're going to need that. And then I would also say, really just kind of go through the process of realizing that you're in a marathon, and also realize that not everyone can do it.
Okay.
Right? So it doesn't make you a failure if you say, I've tried it and it just doesn't work. If you can't, if your child has to go to a private school or even just to a public school, that doesn't mean that you as a parent cannot be deeply involved in where they're learning and how they're learning and what they're doing. Sometimes we get this feeling in homeschool circles like you are a failure, or you're failing your kid because you can't keep doing this. Some people just can't do it long term, and sometimes you do it through elementary and you send them off to high school. I would say don't beat yourself up if that's you, if it just doesn't work for you. Just recognize it's a difficult thing to do, but stay involved in what your kids are learning. Have conversations with them, watch what they're doing in their homework. You can still sit down and tutor them through that process. Just the important thing is to be involved in their process, regardless of how you do it.
All right. Last year we interviewed Wayne Allen Root, vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. He's a homeschool dad as well. And his daughter just got accepted into Stanford, just earned her way through. And he homeschooled his 4 children their whole lives. And he told me that he, with tutors' help, between him and tutors, it was a total of 9 hours per week for children. And the eldest just got accepted into Stanford. He expects the rest to get to their choice of Ivy League schools. Have you noticed, in terms of the hours put in for a return in terms of the quality of education?
Well, I would say that for the hours put in, I think there's definitely a big return, but I think it's also, it's a little bit heavy, right? Because as a parent, if you feel like you want to slack on that, there won't be a return, right? So you've got to be constantly working through that process. It's a full-time job.
Right.
That's how you need to treat it, right? And so, but you need to treat it like you're an entrepreneur, not like you are an employee, right? Because if you have a full-time job as an employee, sometimes, you can just take it pretty easy, and there's a lot of structure around you. If you're an entrepreneur and you take it easy, you go out of business, right? So you need to treat it like it's a full-time job for an entrepreneur, that every day you have to be in there and you work the system. And I think you also, as a parent, especially as a parent, in my case, of multiple children, you have to recognize your child's strengths and weaknesses and realize that their so-called weakness rarely is actually a weakness. It's just their process. And so you have to learn how to deal with that instead of beating your head against the wall and trying to make everybody fit into the same structure. We don't do that. If we have someone who struggles with reading or with writing, then you work with them in a different process than the child who excels in that area.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be as much the way you like to teach a certain way, you like to present information a certain way. It might be that, but they're not responding to that as opposed to responding to the information. Awesome. Ben Swann, thank you very much.
A pleasure.